cute smiles fool you. We take play pretty seriously. But not all of us get the same opportunities to stay active, especially girls. With Made to Play, Nike is committed to getting all kids moving. But they can't do it alone. That's where you come in. Our future is a team sport, and we need all the players we can get. If you're willing, we're ready to show the world exactly what we're made to do. We were made for this. Are you?
Good morning. Hope that got you energized and feeling good. Welcome to the 2023 Nike Community Impact Fund applicant orientation. We're going to do an overview of the fund and then do some grant writing tips and tricks. So Adrian, if you want to move to the next slide, we'll do some introductions. My name is Deb Vaughn, and I am a program officer at the Oregon Community Foundation. I'm based in our Salem office, and among other projects that I work on, I am the OCF liaison for the Nike Community Impact Fund. Kathy, you want to go next?
Yeah, thank you. Hi, everyone. It's so nice to see you all today. Thanks for attending this workshop to learn more about the Nike Community Impact Fund. We'll talk about it as NCIF and how your organization can create more competitive grant applications. As I mentioned, I'm Kathy Webb, and I'm part of the employee engagement team at Nike, where we actually engage our employees in this process to make funding decisions. We'll talk a little bit more about that here in a few minutes, but I'd like to turn it over to OCF, and thanks for your support.
Thanks. I am Adrienne Livingston. I am one of the co-coordinators for the NCIF Fund, have been doing it over 6 years, might be going on 7. And I have been working in the nonprofit industry for 25 years, of which the majority of that has been in the grant making world. So happy to be here with you today, not only to share about the Nike Community Impact Fund, but really Felicia and I will be the ones leading you through the grant writing portion and to help you on your journey in this grant writing, not just for the Nike Fund, but hopefully even for the others that you will be writing. Felicia?
Yes, thank you, Adrian. My name is Felicia Tripp Folsom, and I am one of your program coordinators. And I will be going over your agenda today. Like Adrian, I have over 2.5 decades of nonprofit experience, primarily in the grant making space. Currently, when I'm not doing this, I'm also a trustee for the Children's Levy. So if any of you guys applied there, I am one of the trustees over there as well. And just like what Adrian said, we are here to hopefully help you be able to turn in competitive proposal, whether it's at NCIF or the other grant programs that we administer as well. And with that, here is today's agenda for you. From 10:30 to 11 a.m., we're going to overview the grant program that you guys will hopefully be applying to. We're going to give you some context and some consideration and other resources and how to contact us. And at the end, we're going to have you have some Q&A. After that, from 11 to 12:30, Adrian and I actually are going to go over a grant writing workshop with you, like giving you our years of experience in the field of what actually is an award-winning grant and what funders are looking for when reviewing your grant application.
So with that, I will take you over the overview of the Nike Community Impact Grant Program. The application window is starting quickly. It's January 10th and it goes to February 16th. And this link is already live up with the Oregon Community Foundation, where you can go and you can see the information, the eligibility, etc. The Nike link will be live on January 10th, so we will be putting that out there as well. The priorities of this program is that it delivers a project that delivers impact through the lens of sport and physical activity. That is the majority of what the funds go to, but as you'll see later, there is a portion that does go to non-sport as well. But the projects that address community challenges through innovative community-based solutions, and we have seen many, and we're looking forward to seeing those that you will be presenting as well, should you hopefully apply. The geographic focus and the organizational requirements are that it is a 501c3 organization, that it's a federally recognized Indian tribe, or a government entity such as a school. The counties that this program will be funding into, because this is where Nike employees reside, Multnomah County, Clackamas, Washington, Yamhill, Columbia, Lynn, and Benton, Marion, Polk counties, all in Oregon, but we also do some in Southwest Washington, so Clark County in Southwest Washington. What is not eligible funding, and we do want to highlight this because we often see that there are individuals that apply and they're applying sometimes for areas that are not eligible. So we know that your time is precious and want you to see these areas. So any projects that are research projects, sponsorships of any fundraising events, support for elite or private sports camps, programs, or teams, individuals. So anything that's scholarship-based, stipends, fellowships, or personal assistance that's not eligible. Any group or individual travel, any one-day events, unless the focus of the project is on the program that leads up to a culminating event. So if it's something that you're doing throughout the year and it ends in an event, we don't consider that a one-day event because the program is run throughout the year. But if it's, for example, a fundraising event, again, fundraising is not eligible, not sponsorship, but if it's something where it's even one day at the park for kids playing outside, if there's nothing else that leads up to that day, that's a one-day event that's not eligible for funding. Continued, any endowments, any budget deficits or fundraising activities, any religious organizations whose programs do not have a secular or community focus. So if you are a religious institution, but you have something that is a focus that's secular and community focused and does not have that religious component and aspect, that is eligible. But if it is religious only, it is not. Any lobbying, any political or fraternal activities are not eligible. Any capital projects, unless Nike's award would be the final funding needed. So we've had playgrounds that have been funded through this project because it was a capital project, but the final portion, they had raised everything and Nike's funding would be the final portion of that. That would be eligible, but again, if it's not the final portion, it is not eligible. And projects and events that occur prior to the Nike grant award. So you want to make sure you're looking at when the award would be made and that your project does not start before that. Continued, so the Nike grant, 75% will go to sport or physical activity, and then 25% non-sport. So I know that for some, and we've seen this, for some organizations, they see the non-sport is not as much as the sport. And so we've had some organizations that their main focus is non-sport, but we've noticed that sometimes they have applied for a sport thinking that will give them more opportunity for funding. And really what we really say is focus on what your strengths are as an organization. If you're non-sport, focus on that. Paint the picture, tell us your story of how you make impact in this community. And for those that are sport, again, show what your strength is. That's what we want to see. Help us, you're educating us on the needs of our community. So in this, it's a one-year award of between $5,000 to $25,000 for a total of $550,000 that will be given this year from Nike. And so as far as individuals submitting a grant proposal within 36 months of a previous application, you can do that. We just want to tell you what's more competitive. So if you are applying, you've already received a grant through this fund, within 36 months, if it is the same project, but it's a different location and or it's a different group, that's competitive. Okay. If it's the same project, but it's the same location and or it's the same group, it's not as competitive. Really, it's one where we want to make sure it's still reaching a new population or a new geographic area. So within that, you can apply within the 36 months of receiving an application, but we want you to see what's more competitive. And again, if it's the same project, different location, different group, it is more competitive. So Felicia will talk more about the context and resources.
Yes. And so the most important thing that I would tell you is it's really important for you to understand the audience. And the audience that will be reviewing your grant are actual Nike employees. They're not seasoned grant reviewers like Adrian and myself. So, what does that mean? You have to really give a clear understanding of what you are applying for. And they have to, and it has to be translated in a way that they understand. What you see in this picture was last year's group who awarded the grants in the last cycle. And let me tell you, they really take this process very, very seriously, and they read everything that you give them. And they also go to your websites as well. And so this is a group that you're really, really looking at that will be reviewing your application, not this particular group of people, but similar, made up of Nike employees throughout their footprint. The other thing that we provide you, which I think is a really great thing, are two links that are important. Oregon Community Foundation has a research team that really studies the gaps and the needs that exist in our community in Oregon. This is Oregon centric, so for you that are applying in Southwest Washington, it's not going to apply as much, but it's a really good way of being able to use this data to be able to go out and put that target audience that you're applying for using this data. Also, there is a thing called Oregon by the Numbers that also provides you the same thing. Why are these resources so important? Is that the priority for Nike employees is reaching these underserved and marginalized communities with this fund. That this funding actually has impact. In order to show that, you should have some sort of data, and we're just giving you two examples of where you can find data to really support the audience that you are serving. The other resources that we want you to know is Oregon Community Foundation have other grants. They have their community grant process outside of Nike Community Fund. And so you can really go there and look at the grants and scholarships that they have available as well. And then I don't know if any of you guys are involved with the Nonprofit Association of Oregon, but they also provide technical assistance and they also provide resources. And WVDO is Willamette Valley Development Officers, and they are made up of people that really do this fundraising. So if you right now are a development director and you're like, well, who are my people? WVDO would be your people. And the last thing is you can also under OCF find organizational profiles so that you can really match, and that tool can also show you which grants that your organization could be eligible for as well. And the last thing I would tell you is that Nike has this wonderful, wonderful site called Good 360. And Good 360 is where anybody can go and find out information about what kind of things, like if you wanted to get soccer balls or basketball balls or shoes or whatever, this is a site that Nike provides. And if you have a Nike employee that volunteers with you, Kathy and her team really work to provide a match. So they match dollar for every Nike employee that volunteers at a qualifying 501c3. And the last thing, if you guys have any questions during this process, Adrian and I check this email pretty regularly. And so we are here to assist you, answer any questions as you're going through this process. So this email we checked pretty regularly. So please don't hesitate to reach out and email us. Any questions?
I'll take that off for now.
There are some questions coming in the chat and I'm responding as they come. So feel free to use that resource. And Bailey, I will work on getting those research links into the chat as well.
And I'd like to say that thank you for sharing that Good 360 link. Good 360 is a nonprofit that accepts product from various corporations, even places like Target, with obsolete product. And so go on there. If you're looking for product, this is not the place. What we're talking about today are cash grants. But if you're looking for product, whether it could be mattresses, it could be shoes, it could be various sporting equipment, household goods, go there. And almost all that product is free. So I think it's a really great resource if you're not familiar with it.
Okay, I will go ahead and pull up the second part of this presentation. Okay, come on. There we go. Okay, so we know that the Nike Community Impact Fund, this grant, is not your only option, that you have several out there, which Felicia has shared with you, just a portion. And we know that even the land of the databases that present the different opportunities, we just want to be there on your journey, knowing sometimes it can be frustrating, it can be excited, or you're just being inquisitive and a learner. So we are excited that we actually get to do this. This is the first time Nike has done this, and actually having us do a grant writing workshop to strengthen your proposals, not just for Nike, but overall. This picture we want to show you to show typically when the application period opens, we have a lot of proposals that come to us. But you know, there is limited funding. As much as $550,000 is a lot of funding, it's still limited when you compare it to the need. And so really, as you see, all grant applications received, it's a lot, but this is the amount that we can only approve. And so today we really want to take you through this, how to write a competitive grant application so that you can share your story and help us understand. You're educating us, so that you can hopefully be in that approved category. So just some things, some overall when applying. Funders want to fund. They are really wanting to fund the community. And so in that, what we really highly suggest as a person who has reviewed since over 25 years, same with Felicia, we can tell when someone has not looked at the eligibility or read the guidelines or looked at the frequently asked questions. That's there for you. It's actually there to help you in this process. So please go through it with a fine-tooth comb to see, because that can actually help you in writing your grant application, because they are telling you certain things about their values that you can pull out and put in your application if you're focusing on that. Also follow the instructions. Back in the day, when things were paper, it was, even if organizations, funders said, don't staple, paper clip. That was for a specific reason. And we have people that paper clipped, and sometimes funder would say they're not following the instructions. They wouldn't even read the application. But now here it's looking at the character limit, the word limit, all of that, follow instructions. And then research the organization. What is the funders? What are their missions? What's their values? What's their focus? If they have an About Us page, look at that, read that, learn about the people, because that's giving you information about what they care about. And have a plan. It's paint a vivid picture of your plan. Oftentimes people remember pictures more than just words, or if you see pictures and words together, it helps even more. So paint a very vivid picture of what you are planning to do. So during this time, we're going to put two different frameworks together for you. We are going to, because we really want in the questions that are asked to have these answered: the who, what, when, where, why, and how. That's really key and critical to painting that vivid picture I'm talking about. And that this helps to also be clear, concise, and brief. As you know, in the um, categories online, it is say there is a character limit. So you see that you don't have a lot of space. You do have to be clear and brief, and answering these questions will really help you. And so we are going to layer those questions within the framework of the SMART goals, so that it's specific, that it's measurable, it's achievable, relevant, and time-based. And in that, just here are some examples, and then we'll go through even deeper within the different categories of what more of those who, what, when, where, why, how questions are. So for example, specific. What is the issue or problem being addressed? Really focusing on the issue before you even talk about what you're doing. And then, another part is, how are you going to address it? What exactly is the plan? Measurable. What are your specific quantifiable goals? We want to understand that, because then you have something to measure. Achievable. How are you uniquely qualified to address it? Who are your staff that's doing this, and what's their background? Relevant. How do your goals align with your mission and purpose? And why is this the right time to address this issue or problem? You can show how it is critical and urgent, and that if you were not addressing it, kind of what might then be the detriment to happening if you don't. But if you are addressing it, you're showing that it is critical, that it is urgent, that you need to address this now. That can actually help some funders say, oh, this is something that we need to fund now and not wait. And that is, it's time-based. What is the timeline of your project? So in that, typical questions that are asked in many grant applications: tell us about your organization. What is the problem, issue, or community need you're addressing? Tell us about your program or your project. What is your project or program budget? How will you measure impact? And how will you sustain the project? So what we're getting ready to do, Felicia will go on and talk about the Nike questions that we didn't put all of them in there, but some of the main ones. But as we go through this presentation, we're going to go through each of these different categories and give you the who, what, when, where, why questions within the SMART goal framework based on the question that we are focusing on at that time. So Felicia? Can't hear you.
Sorry, I kept trying to get my mute off, and that's what always happens. And so when you're thinking about, I hope, applying to the NCIF, we have a few questions. These are actual questions that we will be asking you as you turn in your proposals. The very first question we're going to ask you is, what need does your project address? And we literally want you to answer that question. And then we want you to describe the critical community need or issue your project plans to address in the population to be served. It was one of the reasons why, as we sent you those two documents, so that you can really use those as reference points to show the needs that exist in your community. So really having the research and the data to show that this target audience that you are serving, really with this project, you address a need in that community. And that's important, because the second part is, we're going to ask, as your nonprofit, how will this specific funding address the need? So if Nike is going to support this project, how specifically are you going to address the need? And it needs to be brief, but very concise. And we want you to include specific activities and strategies. You would be amazed at how many people don't actually answer this question. And that's why we really, really wanted to emphasize, include details of what specific activities and strategies will you employ in addressing the issue, and why your organization will be the most effective in addressing this need. And so I think that is so, so crucial. And here's another thing that we really want to emphasize to you. What will success look like? And we want you to be specific and, as Adrian referenced, with SMART goal language, measurable outcomes you anticipate as a result of this project activity. And we want you to outline how you will measure the project's success or impact. Again, look at that SMART goal language. Are you answering that when you're looking at what success looks like? And so when you're thinking about the overall grant application, right? Here are the areas that you can kind of look at. You know, somebody's
Sorry.
gonna,
Go ahead. My went. Go ahead.
oh, sorry about that. Is that you want to look at limits, page, characters, and words. So that's really important. You want to bring your organizational background and all of those things. Sorry. So this thing that isn't staying are
Yeah.
the sections that we really want you to address. Problem issues, project descriptions, measurable outcomes, budgets. We want to make sure you have the financial information and the supplemental documents. All of this together produces a very, very strong application.
Now it's going the wrong way. Okay, go. Sorry about that. Did I get there? There you go.
And so when thinking again, when you're thinking about your SMART goals, when you think about your organizational background, what is your mission and purpose? When was the nonprofit founded? I know these are really simple questions, but that's really important. And here's the part that we always emphasize, Adrian and I. What are your programs and services, but in a summary format? If they need a longer detail, we're hoping that it's on your website. It needs to be in a summary. And then here's the other thing. What are the pertinent accomplishments that your organization has made? That should be weaved into your organizational background. And here is a sample of a really strong organizational background. And this, because I know it's hard for you guys to see, I'll read it to you. Our mission is to help homeless youth and other marginalized people move towards improved health and self-sufficiency. We are a health care for the homeless federally qualified health center, a licensed mental health and substance abuse use treatment provider, and an accredited alternative school, a school-based health center, a founding member of the local county homeless youth continuum, and an approved Veterans Affairs patient-centered community care provider. They highlighted everything they did in the opening of their mission. We offer an integrated array of support services too. Look at that. They gave us a very specific population. Youth age, adults aged 16 to 24, experiencing homelessness, and that's including housing, case management, mental health, and alcohol and drug recovery oriented supports and treatments. Here's the other part that we wanted to highlight. A drop-in day program serving 3 meals a day, education, employment training, and comprehensive primary care in our clinic. All going back up to what they say they do, right? Our interdisciplinary team approach creates a support network providing each young person with a community of caring adults. We strive to provide safe, affirming, trauma-informed spaces for people to receive holistic, judge-free care and be treated with the dignity and respect they deserve. Very, very clear when they're going through and explaining their organization. So we, as the reader, say, okay, we know what this organization does.
And they did it within the time limits or the character limits given. So this is very brief and concise, but very detailed. Okay. So here, I don't know why it is doing this, you guys. I have never had this problem. I don't know why. I'm literally pushing the up area. Okay, there we go. So then the community, the problem, issue, the need. What we want you to do is really think of, as you saw the globe, I'm too afraid to go backwards. You saw the globe. We want you to look at this problem, issue, community need as a macro issue. before you even start talking about your program and what you are doing, help define what the problem is. You can use statistics to help frame it, quotes, stories, because before we know what you are addressing, we need to know what the problem is, or maybe it's just an issue, or maybe it's a need. So help define that first for us before you share about your organization. You sharing where it's at, thinking you can go from your state. Maybe you want to address an issue of the state, bringing it down to your city, bringing it down to your county, even into your neighborhood. So really highlighting and detailing that. And what populations does it impact? It might impact multiple populations. You're helping us to understand that. But then when you start talking about your project, and we'll get into that, you only maybe focus on a portion of that population within your project. So talk about the global population it does impact, and talk about who the primary target audience to be impacted directly, and is there an indirect audience or secondary audience that will be impacted. So in those populations, you might have primary audiences, and then you have secondary audiences that are impacted. Help us understand that. And again, using brief stories, quotes, etc., statistics to demonstrate this. So here's a sample. I won't necessarily read all of this, but to those things that stand out for me as a reviewer that helped me to see how you've defined it, I understand that from this, the population that's targeted, middle and high school girls, it's the issue of sex trafficking and domestic violence, and this focus prevention. They're really focusing and helping us understand the commercial sexual exploitation of children, that industry. At a glance, I can see, the common age of entry is 12 to 16 years old. And then here is the global, the macro. In the United States, between 100,000 and 300,000 children are at risk for commercial sexual exploitation each year. So that's defined what the bigger problem is, but then taking it down to a more local level. Portland, highlighting even Portland State University, a study that was done, that it reviewed and revealed 469 unduplicated cases of commercial sexual exploitation of children, knowing that that's not the whole story, but it's giving a glimpse, a sample population of this issue in Portland. It showed that 96% of the victims were female, 40% were white, 27% were Black, 5% Hispanic. The average age was 15.5, hence within the common age of entry. And it says, this is the age that reflects when they got help, but not necessarily when the sexual exploitation began. They also focus and say that this happens to girls, boys, women, and men. So they do help to define that it is a global population, and it's not just middle and high school girls, but specifically here, their program focuses on middle and high school girls. They have a quote, so they've given some statistics, but they also have a quote that there's a book that teaches men how to be a pimp, and here's a quote from a pimp: "With young girls, you promise heaven, and they'll follow you to hell." That's pretty powerful. So in the whole issue, they haven't said what they do, yet within this issue, but they've just helped to define the issue that they're going to address. Here's a second one. A report from the Women's Sports Foundation showed there are over 4 million fewer opportunities for girls to participate in sports as compared to boys. So that's the issue. There's not as many as boys, but they say girls who play sports have higher levels of self-confidence and self-esteem, lower levels of depression, and better academic outcomes. They know that if they get these opportunities, that these girls learn life skills, teamwork, goal setting, etc. So in here, I wanted to also bring more of a sports example for you so that you can see, they brought some statistics, and if girls play, the benefit it would have to them, the impact that it would have. So here for the project description, and this, okay. I will definitely change this on this PowerPoint presentation. Okay, so in your project description, we really want you to be detailed, as you see with the questions that we are providing, because it really helps to paint a picture for us. And what I also do, a part of my life, is helping the blind and low vision community, and I audio describe. And so what that does is basically you have individuals in that community that also want to participate in live events and shows, or they want to hear TV or film. And within the dialogue, they may not get everything. So I come in as a supplement to help say what's happening between the dialogue so they get an image of what's happening on screen or on stage. So I'm going to apply what I do there to this picture. So I'm going to describe to you what I see, and I want you, I mean, you probably have already seen the picture already, but close your eyes. And I'm now going to start describing this picture. And we're going to actually have you in a moment here do the same. And I'm going to actually have you use the chat box. Okay, so what I see are two people. One is an older woman, one is a young girl, about 3 years old. They're both about, they're light skin, light chocolate brown. They're sitting, the woman is sitting down. She is looking at a document with a little girl who is looking down at the paper with her. She is smiling. The girl has brown hair, it's corn rolled back. She has a pink little shirt, possibly a dress on. Her arm is up, and she again has a really cute smile on her face. The woman has a pencil in her hand. She is directing it toward the paper. No, it's actually a paintbrush in her hand, directing it toward the paper. She has short, curly brown hair. She is wearing a light gray button-up sweater. Okay, if you close your eyes, go ahead and open them. You know, that was just a very quick, brief description so that as a person is listening, they get an idea of what a person is literally seeing. We want you to do and paint that same picture in a brief, concise way within your grant writing and sharing your grant story. So, project description, be descriptive. Here are the questions within the SMART goal language of specific. Why is it important to address this issue or problem? We need to know why it's even important. And so what are you doing to address the issue or problem? What populations are you targeting? And what are you going to do to address it? What exactly is the plan? What's your plan, and how will you implement it? And what is the timeline of your project? And as you know, within Nike, it's within the 12 months that you have to use those funds. So you know you have that time limit within this grant funds to use. What change will happen because you have addressed it? And what is the community impact? So it's not just necessarily, it can be the impact that you're making within the group that you're making, that you're working with, but you might actually, it might have an even greater impact. You can share that with us and share client stories and quotes to demonstrate that. So this is where I want you to participate. So I know it might be silent for about 30 seconds, but from this picture, can you use the chat box? And Felicia and W, it's hard for me to see the chat when I'm actually sharing my screen. So once they start filling in, if you can actually read them out, can you describe how you would describe this image? So take a moment and think about using your words for a person who is blind or low vision to describe what you see so they can get an image in their head of what you are looking at. So we'll take a moment. And it could be a sentence, doesn't have to be long, but how you would describe this. Do we have shy people today?
I think so. Everybody is focused.
Well, I will move on, but I really, we have one. I see one. So what is that? Oh, they're coming in. Yay. So Deb or Felicia, if you can read what came in, that would be
I'd be
great.
happy to, because I know Felicia is also working on presenting. So here's one. We're looking at a picture of a young girl about 2 or 3 years old who has pink framed glasses and is wearing her curly brown hair in pigtails atop her head. She is carefully opening different colors. Oh no, I lost my thread. Here we go. She is carefully opening different colored paints while she prepares to roll up her sleeves and get to creating. Let's see, here's another one. A young light-skinned child with curly brown hair in 2 buns with pink glasses and an orange long sleeve shirt, holding small containers of different colored paints. And then let me do just one more for a contrast, because there's a couple more in the chat, but here's one. A young girl, age 3, focuses intensely on opening green paint for her art project.
Nice. Very nice. I love what you guys have already put in there, and I would say this exercise is really to help you in thinking through your project. You know, it's words on a paper, but help me as a reviewer that's reading it visually, imagine what you are doing, that I can put literally myself on that playground. I can put myself in the gym with the kids, that I can literally imagine what you are doing based off of the words that you're sharing on paper.
Adrian, I just want to pop in here because I know this is also a priority for Nike to recognize the full spectrum of gender identity. There's a couple of examples that have come in the chat that are doing a really nice job of describing the individual as a toddler-aged girl presenting child, female presenting child. So I just want to name that as well, that there's some really nice kind of more broadly descriptive language coming into some of the examples.
Wonderful. Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you. So I guess my shy comment just came too quickly because I just needed to allow for that, on Zoom, a little bit more space and silence, because I saw as soon as I said that, they just started coming in. So thank you. Okay, so here is a example of a project description that's specific. The geographic area, Multnomah County, Washington, and Clackamas counties. The primary audience is middle and high school girls age 11 to 18, which are traffickers and pimps target, hence why it's important to target that age group. They have a secondary audience, which are the youth leaders that work with the girls from all a variety of socioeconomic backgrounds. And they say by teaching girls to listen to their intuition, to know healthy relationship characteristics and assert their boundaries, that that can help stop violence in dating relationships and prevent them from being lured, manipulated, tricked, or forced into sexual exploitation. So that gives me a picture of what they're doing within their project and why it's important and what the outcome can be by them addressing this issue. So then there's also, they talk about the curriculum that they have, and they specifically now in the Nike Fund, the character limit may be limited. So you can still show, if you have a curriculum, you can, without putting all like the numbers here, you can still list out what that curriculum is doing and giving us an idea. So for here, there's 7-module curriculum, and we see that specifically. We see that each module is 90 minutes and that the topics, including self-defense, they have identity, self-esteem, personal boundaries, intuition, etc. They go through all of the different modules, and then they talk about their goal for the project period is to enter into committed year-long partnerships with 10 organizations that would become ambassadors of the curriculum, and that they are teaching their partners to facilitate the curriculum with their girls. So Felicia will continue with the achievable and relevant.
I'm on mute again, you guys. And so one of the things we really want you to think about again is SMART goal language. When you really think about the project description, Is your project achievable and is it relevant? I know that sounds really simple, but we're really looking at it. You would be amazed at how many people give us, when we're looking as reviewers, we're like, okay, they have 2 staff. How are they going to serve 1,800 kids? Like we're literally looking at their numbers they're giving us and going, how can they do it with the staff? And so I want you to know that when reviewers are looking at that, they are actually looking at your numbers, looking at your staffing, and really saying, is this actually achievable based off of the limited information we have here? And is this a need that we see among our youth population that is a priority for Nike or whoever the funder is? If you could. And so one of the things I really tell folks to really think about when writing their grants, are you uniquely qualified to address this in your work? And second, I would say who is involved, and this is the most important thing. If it's your program director, give us their background. What makes them qualified to do this role? If you have partners, who are your partners? How are they partnering with you? So sometimes we'll get like, blah, blah, blah is partnering with us. We don't know how, what that organization does. So make sure you're letting us know. And be honest, what are some of the challenges you might be facing? And how are you going to address them? For example, we get a lot from organizations that serve very young youth that collaborate with each other. Some of them will say, we are in the beginning of this collaboration. This is how that collaboration is looking like. Here are some of the things that are challenges for us. We don't think you're going to be able to do everything perfectly. So not only showing your successes, but showing your challenges are really actually great in proposals. And most importantly, how do your goals align with your mission and purpose? And that's really important because we have seen organizations especially apply to the Nike Fund, and we're like, okay, you don't do anything with sports whatsoever, but yet you're applying for a basketball program. Has nothing to do with anything that you do, and it's confusing. So we really tell people, align your goals with your actual mission and purpose. So if you don't do anything that's sports related naturally to your organization, apply in non-sport. Don't try to force your application into sport. And so that's really, really important. And then the other things that I would tell you is, why is this the right time to address this issue and problem? Why are you applying to Nike at this moment or any other funding? And what might be the impact if you don't address it? So you should really talk about, why is it right now? Why is this funding so critical? And what will happen if you don't get funded? And specifically be clear, it's with the population that you serve. And if you look at this organization, they talk about that we have consulted with regarding engaging in partnership with this particular school and university. They're working on social ecological frameworks for violence prevention. And they give you why it's relevant and who is saying it's relevant, which is the United Nations Women's Group. And this is a public health approach to prevent sex trafficking and exploitation. Again, they give you the age, they give you what they're going to do. And here is the other part they do. Traffickers and pimps seek out an opening and vulnerability to exploit girls. And and the need is to feel desired, loved, and you see that piece of it. And it also talks about the backgrounds and economic ethnicities. And they're letting you know that this issue affects all girls, no matter what their social, economic, religious, political affiliation. And they really talk about how right now it's relevant because the United Nations Women Group said it is a public health issue. And so they put urgency around it. They tell you how they're going to do it and why it's relevant. The other thing that we see, an area that we really want to emphasize with everybody on this call, is time-based. What is a timeline of your project? When is this happening? And being detailed about that part, because the Nike funding is funding you for 1 year. What are you going to do in that timeline? Well, and why now? If there's an immediate need, tell us. And we really want you to really emphasize that, because sometimes the difference between getting a grant or not getting a grant is actually timing and immediate need. So when those reviewers are sitting in a room, they're really actually looking at that piece. And here's the thing that I want all of you guys to really think about when writing your proposal. Is it realistic? Can you meet your measurable goals within the time frame listed? So can this be achieved in 1 year? Is it realistic? And because the reviewers are going to be looking at that. Is that a realistic goal? Is it achievable? Can they do this in a year? And as Adrian showed you in the very beginning, you saw the big pile of proposals. When they're narrowing down, the time base is actually a critical component of it. So the next thing about it is, when you're thinking about measurable, just like we showed you in the example, be really, really clear who your target audience is. And show how that's going to impact that particular community. Be really quantifiable in your goals. Be really clear in who you're targeting, and being really clear and precise with the goals attached to that primary audience. We have seen applications, especially because all of you guys are primarily going to be working with youth, is very, very subgroups are some of the most competitive applications we've seen coming out of organizations. And as you can see, how we measure your goals. Make sure you bullet point or number. It sounds simple, but like, I'm going to be doing, with this money, we are going to be doing blah, 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 blah. And this is how we're going to measure it. I mean, be that specific, because remember, you are working with grant reviewers who are not grant reviewers full-time in their jobs. So they're really going to be looking at your goals and saying, is this achievable? Are these measurable outcomes achievable? So they're really going to be looking at that as well.
And if I can just add in here, the reason we say bullet point or number, think of aesthetics. Help the reviewer, because all they see is a paragraph of text. If we see a number or a bullet point, it helps us to see directly, oh, here is what they are doing that I don't have to search for. So you're literally helping me see specifically what you're talking about. And also that image that you saw of that little droplet, is that one little drop that makes the impact. That's what you want to definitely share within your measurable goals, how just the one thing or multiple things that you're doing is making that impact in the audience and population that you're serving. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, no problem. And then again, qualifiable outcomes will be accomplished. How are the soft skills that are hard to measure be quantifiable? One of the things that we see that are really impressive in proposals, or one that highlights the experience of their staff associated with the project that's coming through. That's why that background and experience of your staff and how they're uniquely positioned to do the work is so critical. And think of your secondary indirect target audience. I'll give you one. Parents sometimes are an indirect target audience. You know, what quantifiable outcomes will be accomplished? What qualifiable outcomes will be accomplished? That secondary audience is really good for you to be able to bring in as well. And here is an example of a measurable quantitative and qualitative. So here, and I think this is what we were talking about earlier with bullet points: securing 10 to 20 partnerships with organizations implementing the curriculum. 25 to 50 staff will be trained. We don't want you to think they have to be really complex. You know, on the qualitative side, girls will be able to recognize if someone is trying to groom and recruit them. Girls will be able to learn and practice using their voice and asserting their boundaries. This applicant is giving us both quantitative and qualitative measurements that they feel like they can track and be successful. So as a grant reviewer, you're like, okay, when reading this based off of the target audience, this is achievable. And these measurables are realistic. The second example we're going to give you, which is a polar opposite, is ABC organization will officially hire their first paid executive director. 35 youth will participate in the program. Youth in the program will participate in 35 trips to culturally relevant sites, 100 youth attending a camp of some sort, and increase visibility and awareness.
I just figured you got that, and I was like, I'll move that other slide forward, which I will be changing. So this budgeting, the budget portion of the grant is a numerical representation of the narrative that you've written. So it should match. I've already read the proposal, once I get to your budget, it should make sense because it's numerically representing what you're asking for. And so in that, the budgets, typically you have operating budget, you have capital project. For this grant for Nike, it's typically your annual budget, which would be the operating, and a project budget or a program budget. So the organizational budget typically is an annual budget that shows and demonstrates how much money you need to operate your nonprofit. So that's everything. It shows both income and expenses. And we put that down because we've actually received grant applications that only show the income or only show the expenses. We need to be able to see both income and expenses. And if you have any in-kind services or items given to you, you want to put that in there as well. And as you put it in there, it needs to be both in the income portion and the expense portion so that that balance zeroes out. It needs to show the categories and line items. It helps me as a reviewer understand what your needs are for the program, but then even demonstrating then what are you asking me as a funder for? And it should demonstrate 100% of board giving. Many foundations want to see that 100% of your board members do financially give. So here is a sample of an annual budget where it shows the income portion, very streamlined. It's one page. It's, the individuals, grants, sponsorships, events, etc. that they have in there, and the categories or the line items and the amounts. Then they have it categorized in the expenses where they do program staff. They list all the different staff and what that amount would be to then the program, all the required things and items needed to run the program. And then they have the office costs. And then at the end, as you see, there's the total income, the total expenses, and you see what the income over expenses is, that total. So something just very basic that shows what it takes to operate your nonprofit annually. So with the Nike Community Impact Fund on the Oregon Community Foundation page, there is actually a template that you can download and use. It's under the assistance portion of the Nike Community Impact Fund information that you can then download to use for this grant. So in that, it's easy to read as a reviewer, and it's, again, a simple budget format that has both income and expenses. So the project budget, it's the detailed numerical representation of the project or the program that you are applying for, again, showing both income and expenses and the categories, and using real estimated numbers. So if it's a new program for you, use real estimates. If it's an existing program for you, use what you've done and you've needed. And make sure that if you are using in-kind donations of any kind, whether it's a service, whether it's a product, to have it both in the income as an income expense, but in the expense category as an expense, so that at the end of the day, it doesn't mess with the cash money you're bringing in. It literally does zero out. And I'll show an example of that. Show the funder what they will be funding. And you want to also demonstrate a diversity of revenue sources. As a funder, then what I see is that you're not focusing that all your funds are coming in the form of grants, because that will speak to the sustainability of your program. If I see you have individuals, corporations, sponsorships, earn income, there's so many things that nonprofits are doing, that shows me that you have a diversity of revenue sources and support to run your organization and your program. And
Adrian,
be,
can I add one thing to this?
yep, you sure can.
Yes, the other thing that is really important is that the other thing Adrian and I really look at, especially if you're a newer nonprofit, that you're not 100% relying just on Nike for your operating support. I really want to, so when she's talking about diversity of revenue, it's really seeing who else in the pipeline, especially if anybody on this call is a new organization as well.
Yes. And be realistic about the amount being requested. And then again, show sustainability. So here's an example of a project budget. You see individuals, corporations, and grants that money's coming in kind. It shows the one column of the amount, the second column of the OCF Foundation, which for this, you know, program, yours would be OCF, but it would be Nike, the Nike Fund. But they are showing that they have several committed. They have over the amount in individuals committed. They have some corporate giving, and the grants, as you see, there is a deficit in grant funding, which shows the need of why they're applying to a grant. And they're only asking for 17,000. So say that the fund that they were applying to, the max is 20,000. They're not even asking for that because they're literally asking for their need. So being realistic, you see that there is the total of the in-kind and you have the cash total. But then in the expense, you see the curriculum development expansion, the staffing for that. You see the program, it's for 10 partners. You also see the in-kind from, they actually break it out a little bit more from the materials, the venue, and the food, and then they have that total in-kind. So you see the in-kind income and the in-kind expense. Once at the end, that is a zero balance. So you literally see the cash that we're dealing with. And you see that they're asking for $17,000 from OCF. So that's just a very simple project budget. So now Felicia will move on to the financial portion of this.
Yes. And I always tell people, as somebody that spends a lot of time in finance, my day job, keeping it simple is the best way for reviewers. The more complex your budget is, your budget narrative is, the more questions that will be asked. The more clear your budget narrative is, the less questions that will be asked. The other things that we really want you to really think about is when looking at financial documents, the three things that we really look at are profit and loss statements, which are basically your revenue over expenses over a defined time, your balance sheet, which is a snapshot in time showing which assets you have in your organization and what you owe in liabilities. And the word balance sheet means that it should balance out. That's actually, we're looking to really see if that is. And the last thing is, if you're a 501c3, you should be filling out a 990 tax return. And we want it, that's given to the IRS. And let me tell you, some of the folks go to GuideStar and look at your 990. It is public information, just so everybody knows. That those three things, if you haven't looked at those in your organization, I'm talking about all of you guys, you really should. You should look at your profit and loss statement. You should look at your balance sheet. And most importantly, if you're not the ED, you should look at your 990 within your organization. And the 990 really shows how you did. Sometimes organizations will be delayed a year or two, depending on where they fit in their auditing cycle. But that really shows you a lot within an organization. And all nonprofits that choose to be on GuideStar, the 990 is a public document, just so everybody knows.
And the reason we are being very detailed about both the budget portion and the financials is because we've actually received applications of people submitting to us their checking account balance or their savings accounts balance.
Yep.
None of this. And so that actually does not help paint the picture for your organization for what you're applying for. So specifically with the budget, as you saw the sample of the overall operating annual budget to the project budget to profit and loss statements, that's what helps paint your picture for us to help us understand what the need is and what you're asking for.
Because it's really important to know Nike doesn't fund organizations in the red. And so we really want it. And it's really important because sometimes within a cycle, based off of when a funding a funder is coming in, you might be in the red for a brief moment or snapshot in time, but you end the year in the black. So it's really important that you provide that narrative. And the last thing a lot of organizations provide if you are required, is an audited financial statements. And that's an independent auditor, but not all organizations have that. And we don't expect all organizations. There are quite a few that apply to Nike that don't have audited financials, but if they do, 9 times out of 10, they provide them. And then the last thing is, the last two things are related to staffing, your W-9s and your 1099 forms. And so those are things we just wanted you guys to know, these definitions just for you. But the most important thing that everybody checks in, OCF does this, their due diligence, is making sure you are a current 501c3 organization, or that you are sponsored by a current 501c3 organization. And here is an example of the 501c3 IRS letter sample. If you've never seen it, this is what it looks like. We also look, when you look at this board right here, the other thing Nike employees look for is the diversity within your board. Is it representation of the audience that you serve? Is it made up? It's not just ethnically diverse. Is it socioeconomic? Is it geographic? Whatever that diversity is, they're also looking at that as well.
So this next portion, we're going to be talking about the supplemental documents of that you can
Adrian,
actually.
oh, there, it's better. There was some background noise, but it just cleared up.
Yeah, I heard it too. I don't know where that's coming from. So the supplemental information, you actually can upload things to help paint that picture for us. So you have support letters, but I would say making sure that they're relevant support letters to help strengthen your proposal. So whatever you're providing, it helps strengthen what you've already written to us in your narrative, whether, blogs, links to videos, photos, obviously your website that we go to, if you do podcast, pictures of clients engaging and what activity, what you're doing, any newsletters, if you're using a specific framework or a project model, to include that. So you can include all those things to help strengthen your proposal. And as Felicia already started to talk about the diversity, how does your board reflect a diverse board? Does your staff reflect a diverse community? Are you intentionally serving communities of color? And the Nike Fund is looking at that, and it's the intentionality, looking at the representation on your website and other communications, to who are you partnering with and who are your consultants or contractors. You can bring all that out in your proposal to demonstrate your intentionality to diversity, equity, and inclusion. So some final thoughts. We're coming to the end. So once we come to the end, I will take this presentation down so that we can see you and you can ask questions. But here are just some extras. Mirror the language funders use. So if they're saying that they have a specific value and you actually do that value, you're operating in that, call that out using language, and that's easy to understand, easy to read. It's a clear layout. As we said, think aesthetically, help the reviewer find what you are saying in there by using points, spacing, numbers, etc. To then solicit others to review and provide feedback. Does it answer the 5, the who, what, when, where, why, and how? And is there anything in there that's not clear or that raises questions? I've written grants, and no matter how many times I've written grants, I still have other people review it, because sometimes I just can't see what I don't see. I've been, in the proposal for so long that I may not see it. And I have people read it that are not grant reviewers, to have people that I know do write grants, because I know both of them are going to give me information that they, have their perspective and may not see. Well, let me see. Someone who is not a grant reviewer, sometimes when I've given it to them, they have called out things that even a grant reviewer that I've given my proposal to hasn't called out, because they are seeing it with fresh eyes. That's what you want on your application. You want fresh eyes on them, so that it can really help you strengthen, whether it's the way you say something or calling out something that you needed to call out, or it's like, oh, is that by you putting that in there, it actually has me ask more questions and raises a red flag or something like that. So it's nice to have fresh eyes on an application. And use as much space as you need within the parameters given, even if it's less space. So if they give you 1,000 characters, but you only need 880, use 880. That's just fine. As long as you have been able to give them the detail that they need to paint that picture, to know what you are applying for and what you need and the impact that it's going to make. And use strength-based language and goal language instead of saying, I desire to, our goal is, just really using concrete language that's power-based, strength-based language within the proposal, and ask for what you need. If you need 20,000, ask and demonstrate the need for 20,000. If you need 5,000, ask and need, show the need for 5,000, even if the amount that they give is more. Really, we can see when you organizations are asking for the max amount just because that's a max amount. Highly recommend only asking for that if that's what your true need is. If it's less, do that. Okay, so here, I know Felicia has already mentioned the contact information. This is the same email. So what I will do right now is stop sharing so we can go to answering questions if you have any. There we go.
You can also feel free to put questions in the chat if you have any that are lingering.
Mhm. Or any comments about what we shared, is this helpful? Maybe you are a grant writer and you have something else you want to share with others. We are always learning as well. So yeah, this is time for you.
Is the budget template you provided, is it required we use that, or is that a suggestion, or?
No, it's just available. Yeah, it's you do have to submit a project budget, but you don't have to use that template.
Great, thank you.
Even though it's not, for individuals, is it possible to ask for like funding for a staff budget?
Staff, yes. It would have to be within the program that you just demonstrate. This is what our need is. These are the staff that are going to help operate and implement this, and this is the then amount. So yes, that would not be considered individual. This is just more like if it's a scholarship or a grant for someone to go to a college fair or something like that. So we're talking about literally individuals in that way.
One that's common for Eric for Nike is we get a lot of private sports organizations that want to give scholarships for their elite soccer program or basketball program to a low-income kid, to scholarship them into an elite soccer program or basketball program or football program or something like that. And that is not eligible.
Got it. Thank you so much.
Mhm.
Some grantors that I've worked with provide their scoring criteria or a rubric. Is that something that you all are willing and able to do, so we can sort of see the assessment, questions and points and things like that?
So all of the application questions are posted on the OCF Nike webpage that I shared. And I think I would leave, so there's not hard and fast scores that determine who's going to receive the funding. What we give to our reviewers are some numbers and priorities to guide their read of the applications and help us begin to prioritize. But really where the decisions are made is in the conversation with those employees who live and work in the communities that the applicants are serving. But Adrian and Felicia or Kathy, you want to add some additional context there?
Bailey, what I see, rubrics are generally done with, this is, as we emphasized earlier, this is an employee-based program. They're not professional grant reviewers, and this is their employee fund. Usually when you see rubrics and those sorts of things, like for the children's levy, for example, we have a rubric, but we have a whole department. Yeah, most of the organizations that do this full-time with professional grant reviewers like Adrian and myself have rubrics. But this fund, which is a blessing, Kathy does a wonderful job of getting every year a new group of employees that get to engage and see the mission and the purpose of Nike, and they get training and but they actually get to decide as a group who is funded, who is not. And Kathy, would you like to add anything else?
Oh, can't hear
Sorry.
you.
Now, no, I don't need to add any of that. I'd like to address a question that's in the queue when it's appropriate.
Well, I will add too. So to that, just so that people know, the Nike employees are actually, when they're trained, we take them through the report that OCF has given about the gaps in Oregon. So if that helps you, you'll see a framework that they're actually looking at to see, okay, what are the needs of Oregon? And then what are these organizations that's applying to us doing to help meet those needs and bridge that gap? So it's not a rubric, but it's a framework that they are being trained to look at the proposals that they receive. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. That's helpful.
You're welcome. Okay, Kathy, go right ahead.
Awesome. I see a question, maybe Deb answered it, from Madison. Okay, she answered it, but it was a really good one because I think this comes up a lot where you're hosting ongoing programs and you're looking for funding. And we just told you that if it's a program that's already being hosted before the checks are dispersed, maybe you don't need our money. It's kind of the thinking. But Deb answered it well, and that is, it doesn't have to be a brand new program, but maybe you're starting a new training session that you'd like funding for, even though you've been hosting it for a while. It's just a new cohort or a new group of people. But it's easy. I think it's easy for you to navigate to build to ask for funding for a brand new cohort of people for that training.
And I think I'll add that Kathy, well, so first of all, I want to point out my intentional language in the answer to that question, that a proposal that was like what Madison described would be eligible for consideration. It doesn't necessarily mean that that would be a particularly competitive proposal for exactly the reason that Kathy mentioned. If it's an ongoing program that has been part of your operations for years and years, then it may not be demonstrating what kind of impact Nike support would have on changing, enhancing, growing, expanding the work that you're doing. So I think in order to make a proposal like that competitive, highly responded to by the committee, it would need to go deeper, reach further, do something. Nike's investment would need to add or enhance what you were already doing.
And in this case, maybe you can offer the training in a community that's never had the training before. It's the same training you've been hosting for years, but it's a brand new community that really needs you, that you need the funding to support.
I was starting to type answers in the chat, but I think at this point it takes a little bit longer to do that. So let's stop on them, and I will, Jessica's asking a question about capital improvement, wanting to update the school's asphalt for pedestrian and bicycle safety training. So we talked about capital support early on in the webinar, that this fund can support capital projects. Playgrounds improvements are something that we frequently see requested here. The caveat is that the request to Nike needs to be the final fundraising needed to complete the project. So don't come to this fund at the beginning of your fundraising, but at the end. So show how Nike's investment will complete that fundraising and make the project a reality. So Jessica, I think you could certainly explore a proposal for what you're talking about, depending on where you are in raising funds for that. Sarah is asking about serving youth throughout Oregon, and how would a proposal be structured? And you've asked, would we recommend to develop a specific project focused on the 10 eligible counties for the grant. I would say, yes, this grant is for projects that serve youth in those 10 counties. So you would need to demonstrate how you're impacting there. And I will just offer the caveat that there will likely be questions about how a statewide organization with such a broad reach has the kind of deep impact on youth. So you would just want to address that. I don't think it would be a consideration that it doesn't happen. I think you just want to be very intentional in your application about how you build those local relationships and sustain them throughout the period of the funding, because that's going to be an important piece when you know that many other applicants are local community-based organizations that might have a stronger presence right there down the street. So that's just a consideration when you're working with a broader geography. Valerie, average number of applicants each cycle. Last year, I think we got 175 in this program. And I believe we were able to fund about 50 or 60 of them at some varying level, not all of them at the full amount. So I would say it's a pretty competitive program. And I know that this team here of the 4 of us plus the Nike employees that work with us really love to see the broad spectrum of proposals and learn about new work that is happening. And because your time has value, that we don't want you to submit a proposal just to see what happens, right? We really want to see those proposals that have a strong alignment with the priorities of this fund, which is about getting young people engaged in the communities they live in those 10 counties that we mentioned. So I think Nike recognizes that there are a variety of community needs that are happening. And what we're really looking at with this fund is how to get young people feeling supported, connected, empowered. I think it all goes back to that video that we showed at the very beginning of this webinar, empowering young people to see a vision and for their place in the world. So we're looking for proposals that line up as strongly as possible with that aesthetic.
And I'll add to that, Nike employees are encouraged to innovate in all of our daily jobs. So we're always looking for innovation, and they do so in these grant proposals as well. So if you have just a great idea that you want to test, we're good with that. Employees love testing. It doesn't have to have been tried and true, but if you can articulate that you've got this vision and idea that you'd like to try out and you need some Nike funding to do it, we're all about it. Doesn't mean can't sit here and say you'll get the grant, but it will be competitive. Employees like seeing that.
Great. Eileen has asked a question about swim lessons that run April through September. So some youth will have started in the program prior to the funding period. My recommendation is do not include those youth in your funding proposal. Those youth that swim from April through May will not be supported by Nike's investment. So don't count them in your impact numbers. Don't include that in your project. You talk about the impact that you will be making with the investment that occurs at the beginning of June and going forward. It's certainly appropriate in your budget to include the entire budget for the work that you're doing. But I think you really want to focus on how Nike can help support those students that are participating during the funding period, which again will begin at the end of May, beginning of June of this year and run for a full year. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and post again the email address where you can be in touch with Adrian and Felicia and I. So if you have a more specific question or nuance, something we didn't get to here today, feel free to reach out. And I think I will just turn it back over to Kathy if you have any closing thoughts as we conclude the session today.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, OCF. It's such a privilege to work with you on this project. We're in our 14th year and we've engaged over 1,000 employees in this process. So it's pretty cool. So yeah, thank you for being here. Love seeing some familiar faces. and look forward to receiving those applications. We're here for you if you have any questions along the way. But as mentioned, come Tuesday morning on the 10th, that application will be live and you can start the work.
Yes. Thanks, everyone.
Everybody
Thank
have
you,
a great
everyone.
day. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Happy New Year.